At 6:38 in the morning, July 10 in 1940, a thin line appeared on a radar display inside a wooden operations hut near the village of Bawdsey on the coast of Suffolk, England. The signal was faint but unmistakable, a cluster of echoes forming over the Pas-de-Calais region of northern France, moving northwest across the English Channel. Inside the station control room, operators of the Royal Air Force chain home radar network leaned closer to their cathode ray screens. The glowing traces represented something more than electronic noise. They represented aircraft, dozens of them, possibly more. The radar tower outside the station stood nearly 350 feet tall, a lattice of steel supporting transmitter arrays that broadcast radio waves at frequencies between 20 and 30 megahertz. When those waves struck large metal objects, such as aircraft fuselages, part of the signal reflected back. The returning echo traveled through receiver antennas positioned on 240-foot wooden towers, then into electronic amplifiers inside the operations hut. From there, the information appeared as moving spikes on the radar scope. Each spike meant distance. Each movement meant direction. By 6:42 in the morning, the radar operators had enough data to report an organized formation approaching the southern coast of England. The duty controller immediately passed the information through a dedicated telephone line to No. 11 Group Fighter Command headquarters at RAF Uxbridge, where Air Vice Marshal Keith Park oversaw the defense of southeastern England. The message was simple but precise. Enemy aircraft detected. Distance, approximately 70 miles south of Dover. Estimated strength, more than 100 aircraft. Altitude estimate, 15,000 feet. For the first time that morning, the defensive system of Britain began to move. The radar operators had done their job. Now the decision belonged to Fighter Command. Inside the operations room at RAF Uxbridge, a large map table filled the center of the chamber. Colored blocks represented squadrons of the Royal Air Force Fighter Command. Small markers tracked incoming raids, reported by radar and confirmed by the Royal Observer Corps, a network of trained civilians positioned across southern England. At 6:47 in the morning, Air Vice Marshal Park issued the first scramble order of the day. The target squadron was No. 65 Squadron RAF, stationed at RAF Hornchurch in Essex. The unit operated the Supermarine Spitfire Mark I, powered by a Rolls-Royce Merlin II engine, producing 1,030 horsepower. Each aircraft carried 8.303 Browning machine guns, mounted in the wings with a combined ammunition supply of approximately 2,000 rounds. Within 3 minutes, ground crews had removed wheel chocks and signaled the pilots forward. At 6:51 in the morning, 12 Spitfires from No. 65 Squadron lifted from the runway and climbed east toward the channel. The scramble was timed carefully. Without radar, Fighter Command would have been forced to keep large numbers of aircraft constantly airborne in patrol formations. That would have consumed fuel, exhausted pilots, and reduced available aircraft for later engagements. But the chain-home radar network changed the equation entirely. Instead of guessing where the enemy would appear, British commanders now knew. The radar network stretched along the eastern and southern coastline of Britain, from Ventnor on the Isle of Wight to the station at Dunkirk in Kent and north toward Yorkshire. By 1940, the system included more than 20 radar stations, each capable of detecting aircraft formations at ranges exceeding 100 miles. Every detection flowed through a centralized command structure. Radar stations reported to Fighter Command headquarters at RAF Bentley Priory, commanded by Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding. Dowding had spent years designing a defense system built on 4 integrated parts: radar detection, ground observer confirmation, centralized command analysis, and rapid fighter interception. Together, these components formed what historians later called the Dowding system. Its purpose was simple: defeat a numerically superior air force through information and timing. Across the Channel that same morning, the German Luftwaffe Air Fleet II, commanded by Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, had launched a large formation of aircraft from bases near Calais and Boulogne. The attacking force included Dornier Do 17 medium bombers, escorted by Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters from Jägerschwader 26. Their objective was to attack British shipping in the Channel and provoke Fighter Command into battle. German planners believed the British defense system depended mainly on visual observation posts. They assumed that British fighters would not know the size or direction of incoming raids until the aircraft crossed the coastline. They were wrong. By 6:58 in the morning, the radar operators along the coast had already tracked the Luftwaffe formation for more than 20 minutes. In the command room at Uxbridge, new markers appeared on the map table as additional radar stations confirmed the track. Estimated strength now revised: more than 120 aircraft, heading directly toward the shipping lanes near Dover Strait. Park studied the map carefully. He had already launched one squadron, but the size of the formation suggested something larger. A single squadron might not be enough. At 7:03 in the morning, he ordered a second scramble. No, 32. Squadron RAF, flying Hawker Hurricane Mark I fighters from RAF Biggin Hill. Within minutes, 24 British fighters were climbing toward the incoming German formation. The intercept had begun before the Luftwaffe pilots even reached the English coastline, and none of them knew they had already been detected. But along the coast of Kent, one radar station began reporting something unusual. The radar return behind the first formation was growing. Another cluster of echoes. Larger, faster, possibly a second wave. And if that estimate proved correct, the first battle of the morning might only be the opening move. At 7:11 in the morning, July 10, 1940, the radar operators at the Chain home station at Dunkirk in Kent reported a second set of returns appearing over the French coastline. The new formation was larger than the first. On the radar scope, the echoes formed a dense band stretching nearly 8 miles across. The estimated strength quickly climbed past 150 aircraft. Inside the operations room at RAF Uxbridge, plotters moved wooden markers across the large map table. Each marker represented an incoming formation detected by radar and verified through the reporting network of the Royal Observer Corps. Time mattered. Speed mattered even more. The first Luftwaffe formation was now only 30 miles south of Dover, flying at an estimated altitude of 16,000 feet. The second formation followed approximately 12 minutes behind. Air Vice Marshal Keith Park immediately understood the tactical problem. If every available fighter squadron launched at once, the first interception might succeed. But the second wave could arrive when British squadrons were low on fuel and ammunition. Fighter Command did not possess unlimited aircraft. In early July 1940, No. 11 Group controlled only 25 operational squadrons across southeastern England. Each squadron normally fielded 12 aircraft, although mechanical failures and combat losses often reduced that number. The Luftwaffe could launch more than 1,000 bombers and fighters from airfields across northern France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Park relied on timing to balance that numerical disadvantage. At 7:14 in the morning, the controller at Uxbridge issued new instructions to No. 65 Squadron, the Spitfire unit already climbing over the Thames estuary. The Squadron Leader John Waddy, adjusted his formation heading slightly southeast. Radar tracking indicated the first German group would cross the Channel shipping lanes near Folkestone within 10 minutes. The Spitfires continued climbing toward 20,000 feet, where the Merlin engines produced optimal performance for interception. Meanwhile, the Hurricanes of No. 32 Squadron, commanded by Squadron Leader Lionel Mordaunt, climbed more slowly from RAF Biggin Hill. The Hawker Hurricane Mark I carried the same 8 Browning machine guns as the Spitfire, but its maximum speed was lower, approximately 325 miles per hour at 20,000 feet, compared with the Spitfire Mark I maximum speed of roughly 362 miles per hour. However, the Hurricane possessed a stronger wing structure and greater stability as a gun platform. Fighter Command doctrine therefore assigned Hurricanes primarily to attack bombers, while Spitfires engaged the escorting Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters. The radar information made this coordination possible. Without it, both squadrons might arrive at the same altitude and engage the wrong targets. At 7:19 in the morning, radar stations along the Kent coastline began to lose altitude clarity on the incoming German formation. This limitation was a known weakness of the Chain home radar system. The early radar sets could measure distance and general direction very well, but altitude estimation became less accurate once aircraft approached the coastline. That gap in information was filled by the Royal Observer Corps, whose volunteers used binoculars and optical range equipment to identify aircraft types and heights once they became visible. At 7:22 in the morning, an Observer Corps post near Deal in Kent confirmed visual contact. The report moved quickly through the communications network. Enemy aircraft confirmed. Approximately 40 Dornier Doe 17 bombers, escorted by roughly 60 Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters. Altitude estimated 17,000 feet, heading northwest toward Channel shipping. Inside the command room at Uxbridge, the tactical picture became clear. The first German formation intended to strike the merchant convoys moving through the Dover Strait, where British cargo ships carried coal, steel, and fuel supplies between ports. Destroying those convoys would disrupt coastal logistics and force the Royal Navy to divert escort vessels from other operations. But from a larger strategic perspective, the attack had a deeper purpose. German commanders wanted to draw Fighter Command into repeated air battles. Every British fighter destroyed meant fewer aircraft available to defend the island if Germany attempted a cross-channel invasion known as Operation Sea Lion. The radar network complicated that plan. Because Fighter Command could track raids while they were still over France, British commanders launched only the number of squadrons required to intercept each formation. No more, no less. At 7:27 in the morning, the Spitfires of No. 65 Squadron spotted the German aircraft ahead. The sunlight reflecting off the bomber formation made them visible from nearly 5 miles away. The Dorniers flew in tight defensive boxes, each bomber carrying 3 machine gun positions and a bomb load of roughly 1,000 kilograms. Above them, the Messerschmitt fighters formed a protective screen, but the German pilots did not know the Hurricanes of No. 32 Squadron were climbing behind them, and they certainly did not know another radar report had just arrived at Uxbridge. The second Luftwaffe formation detected earlier was still approaching. And this time the radar operators estimated something much larger. More than 200 aircraft, bombers, fighters, possibly multiple Gruppen from different German wings. The first battle was seconds away from beginning, but the real test of the radar defense system would arrive with the second wave. Because if the timing failed, British fighters could be caught refueling on the ground, and southern England would briefly stand without protection. At 7:32 in the morning, July 10, 1940, the first engagement of the day began above the Dover Strait. The Spitfires of No. 65 Squadron RAF descended from 20,000 feet, angling toward the escorting fighters above the German bombers. Their leader, Squadron Leader John Waddy, understood the doctrine that guided Fighter Command operations. Spitfires would hold off the Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters. The Hurricanes would attack the bombers. Below them, the Dornier Do-17 bombers continued toward the shipping lanes. Each aircraft carried a crew of 4 and a bomb load designed for coastal strikes. Their narrow fuselages gave them the nickname Flying Pencil, but the aircraft still relied heavily on fighter protection. At 7:34 in the morning, the Hurricanes of No. 32 Squadron RAF reached the bomber formation. The squadron leader Lionel Mordaunt, ordered the attack. The Hurricanes approached from the rear quarter, where the defensive machine guns of the Dorniers had the weakest firing arcs. 12 British fighters opened fire almost simultaneously. Each Hurricane carried 8.303 Browning machine guns, firing roughly 1,200 rounds per minute per gun. In a 2-second burst, a single Hurricane could send more than 300 rounds into a target area. The effect was immediate. One Dornier bomber began trailing smoke from the port engine. Another aircraft dropped out of formation, losing altitude rapidly over the channel, but the escorting Messerschmitt fighters reacted quickly. Pilots from Jagdgeschwader 26, flying the Messerschmitt Bf 109E model, dove toward the Hurricanes. The German fighters carried 2 20mm MG FF cannons and 2 7.92mm machine guns, giving them heavier short-range firepower than the British fighters. Above the engagement, the Spitfires of No. 65 Squadron intercepted the diving German fighters. The air battle broke into multiple swirling engagements across several thousand feet of altitude. From the cockpit of a Spitfire, the sky now contained dozens of aircraft moving at speeds approaching 300 miles per hour. Formation discipline dissolved into individual engagements as pilots tried to gain position behind enemy aircraft. But the larger story of the battle was unfolding far away from the gunfire. Inside the operations room at RAF Uxbridge, radar updates continued arriving from stations along the coast. At 7:38 in the morning, a new report came from the Chain Home Station at Ventnor on the Isle of Wight. The second German formation had crossed the French coastline. Estimated strength now confirmed, more than 200 aircraft. The formation included Heinkel He-111 bombers, Dornier Do-17 bombers, and large numbers of Messerschmitt Bf 109 escorts. This was no small follow-up raid. It was a major strike group. Air Vice Marshal Keith Park now faced the central challenge of the entire Battle of Britain. Fighter Command possessed limited resources. Aircraft needed fuel. Pilots needed time to rearm and reload ammunition. If the first interception drained British squadrons too heavily, the second wave could strike southern England without resistance. But radar changed the timing of that decision, because Park knew exactly where the second formation was, and more importantly, how long it would take to arrive. At 7:42 in the morning, the first German bombers began releasing bombs against merchant ships moving through the Channel convoy routes. Columns of water erupted around several cargo vessels as bombs struck the sea. British fighters continued attacking the bombers, forcing many of them to scatter and release their bombs early. The engagement lasted nearly 15 minutes. By 7:48 in the morning, the surviving German aircraft began turning back toward France. But the radar network was already preparing the next response. At 7:51 in the morning, new scramble orders were issued. 2 additional squadrons launched from RAF Kenley and RAF Tangmere. The radar tracking stations estimated the second German formation would reach the English coast at approximately 8:20 in the morning. That gave Fighter Command just enough time. Pilots from the first engagement began returning to their airfields at 7:55 in the morning. Ground crews moved immediately into action. Fuel trucks approached the aircraft. Ammunition belts were reloaded into the wing-mounted Browning machine guns. Damaged aircraft were pushed aside while serviceable fighters prepared for a second launch. Without radar, none of this coordination would have been possible. Fighter Command would have been reacting blindly. Instead, every movement of the Luftwaffe was being tracked across the channel. This advantage did not guarantee victory in any single battle, but it changed the mathematics of the entire campaign. Germany needed to destroy Fighter Command before any invasion could occur. To do that, the Luftwaffe needed to catch British fighters unprepared. The Chain Home radar network prevented that surprise. Every incoming raid appeared first as a faint echo on a glowing screen. Every echo triggered the same chain of events: detection, tracking, scramble, intercept. The system conserved aircraft, protected pilots, and allowed Britain to fight a larger enemy on equal terms. Across the coming months of July through October 1940, this network would guide hundreds of interceptions across southern England. Radar stations would detect raids approaching from France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, often more than 100 miles away. Those early warnings allowed Fighter Command to survive repeated assaults from an enemy that possessed greater numbers of aircraft. By the end of the Battle of Britain in October 1940, the Luftwaffe had failed to destroy the British air defense system. Operation Sea Lion was postponed indefinitely. The island remained unconquered, and the first warning of every incoming raid had begun the same way, with a small signal appearing on a radar screen